Mark, thank you for joining us very early in the morning in an undisclosed location. We don't want the sleeper cells to know. But yeah,
Actually, that's not far off from the truth because I think there was some terrorist activity where I am. I think a pro-Iranian Persian bookstore was shot at from the streets in this very city for their support of the rising monarchist movement over in Iran. So it's not so far off to say that there's a little bit of action here where I am at my undisclosed my undisclosed location. Yeah, so I think I should provide a little context for everybody here because I don't know that it's a common, well, I guess it's a fairly common phenomenon for objectivists to have disagreements on particular issues, even though we share a very broad base of values. The Libertarian Party had written I guess, a proclamation condemning the war in Iran, and the American Capitalist Party board thought it was appropriate that I answer that. My initial answer, which I had written just to the board itself, I posted as a personal thought on Facebook for anybody who wants to see what my personal feelings on this conflict are. However, we posted an official statement from the Capitalist Party, which I primarily authored, which sticks to the principle of enumerated powers and the strict limitations on the executive, because we think that despite my agreement with the war and the morality of the war, I do think Iran has a long list of crimes that they have committed against United States citizens, of course, and other citizens of the world. It's probably a conflict that should have been engaged in from 1979 on. Uh, our dereliction of responsibility to the American public has increased Iranian stature to such a degree that now this conflict is finally happening. But we do believe that in the interest of protecting American liberties and in restraining the power of an executive, particularly this executive, who has a habit of tossing the Constitution away, and in the interest of being a nation of laws, not men, I subordinate my feelings about this to constitutional processes, which I think preserve the liberties of the people and make war a deliberative process as it should be. The founders intended war to be a deliberative process in the hands of the people's representatives, and that the executive should get permission from the representatives of the people to move forward with any kind of conflict. Now, I know this isn't strictly illegal. War powers have given the president some latitude with respect to sending troops overseas. And so I don't think this is strictly illegal, but I do think it is unconstitutional, and that we have to start reining in the president, because these liberties taken in by the executives today become the new powers that the executive possesses tomorrow, and those powers can be used against citizens of the United States of America. So look, vigilance for liberty starts at home, and that means oftentimes we have to subordinate our emotions in the moment and always go for the principle over the feeling. That's my sense of the conflict in a nutshell. We can get into the particulars if you want to. Now, I know you said you don't want to debate the Constitution. You're going to bring somebody on here who's a bit of a heavy hitter who's going to debate that with me. Unfortunately, I don't want to debate it either. I think we should discuss it, since we are all sharing the same values and have a disagreement with respect to what powers the president should have. That's as far as my sense of restraint goes. It's a restraint of the power of the political class, and looking towards the long term of the restraint of the power of the political class, not satisfying my short term, but satisfying the long term requirements for American citizens to remain free.
so I completely agree that we should act on principle and not emotion. My disagreement here is what the starting point is. And the starting point is and should be reality, not the Constitution. The Constitution is not, and I said this on yesterday's stream. Some of this sounded like the Constitution is being treated in the way that religious people treat the Ten Commandments. The Constitution is the best document of its kind that has ever been written, or at least ever been enacted, but it is not a perfect document. So whether or not this is constitutional doesn't change the fact that this needs to be done. Now, the best idea that I've heard on this was towards the end of yesterday's stream when Alejandro suggested when we first saw the statement by the American Capitalist Party right towards the end of the stream. Alejandro suggested that it should have been something to the effect of course, we support this war. Had the American Capitalist Party been in power now, we would have essentially set a precedent, at least for the past 80 years, of going to Congress to declare war, because that's not something that's been done in the past 80 plus years. But the bottom line is this is a major historical moment. I think the biggest one that we are living through. I think it is uh, the biggest moment militarily for the West since World War II, and again, it is also it's it much of it reminds me of kind of Chamberlain's approach. And remember, Chamberlain's approach wasn't against a country that attacked Britain, and Chamberlain eventually went to war without Nazi Germany attacking Britain. This is a country that has attacked the U.S. repeatedly over half a century, and war has been declared by the enemy. America has to finally fight back, and I'm glad that it is.
Razi, can I address this then? You can't say that I agree with principle, but we have to separate ourselves from principle and act pragmatically. You cannot stand for principle if you do that. Now, if you don't like the document, there is a means by which the founders have put into the document where you can change it. Now, they've made it difficult to change it because they understand that it should be a deliberative process embraced by a supermajority of the American people. Now, you can change the document. If you think that the executive powers are too weak, you can go about amending the Constitution, and that's the appropriate way in which the American citizens' liberties are protected. Yes, we have not declared war in 80 years, and during that time, especially during the 70s, since the expansion of the executive power through war powers, we have had forever wars, wars that have wound up with our men dying in foreign countries for absolutely nothing, for a hill that gets retaken by the enemy later on. They've drained our treasuries. They've destroyed our rights and liberties here at home. This is a real phenomenon as well that we cannot ignore. Now, it may be that the long-term effects of expanding a president's power, like President Trump, is an abstraction to you, and the immediate thing that's happening is more important to you, and it's certainly on our minds and in our emotional lives right now. It's immediately present to our senses, and that's overriding, I think, the long-term idea that the principle of enumerated powers is one of the most important principles of the restraint of the federal government, and one of the biggest preservers of American liberty that we have, and that we should stick to it under all circumstances. It's not convenient. It's cumbersome. It's a pain in the ass in many respects, and we don't always get what we want or what we feel like getting, but it's certainly a way that American liberties are preserved in the long term. Now, look, I wrote essentially what Alejandro said in my own personal response, and I posted it on Facebook because I wanted people to see we are not like the Libertarian Party. We're not pacifists. We do believe in conducting a war completely. In other words, until the enemy is completely vanquished, until they surrender, until Islamicism, if we were in power, we would get the approval of Congress, and we would prosecute the war until Islamicism is effectively dead. And we would unapologetically impose constitutional norms in the same way that MacArthur imposed them on Japan, because we understand that Western culture is preferable to what is over there, and we have no apologies about imposing that. And I don't think in Iran we would need to. I think they want a constitutional monarchy. I think there's a liberal element in Iran that didn't exist in Iraq, but we would certainly prosecute the war in the way that war would need to be prosecuted and hasn't been prosecuted in 70 years.
Yeah, so just to point out again, I'm not advocating for pragmatism. I am advocating for a principled approach. We disagree on what the starting point for the principle is. Mine is reality. And from this statement, the American Capitalist Party starting point is the Constitution, which is not the right starting point. If the Constitution in this situation, America needs to fight back against Iran and has needed to for 47 years. If the Constitution, if
All the more
if
reason for
so,
approval.
if the correct interpretation of the Constitution is that this war shouldn't happen, this war should still happen, and the Constitution should be amended if and when that happens. Another point, just that you made a point about the War Powers Act. That's and forever wars. The War Powers Act is from 1973. Forever wars started from Korea. The reason it started is because for some reason after World War II, and you can see that in the approach in the Nuremberg trials, the West has decided that specific acts, are what's important in a war rather than the ideas, and therefore took specific acts like, using the full might of the military, including against civilians, out of the equation for the West, and put Western countries under rules of engagement that only apply to them and make wars unwinnable, and therefore you are forever in those wars. So what needs to
Yes,
be repealed is
sure.
just war theory first and foremost.
Yeah, I agree that just war theory has been the driving moral factor behind forever wars. It's trying to civilize what is essentially an uncivil act. When a war happens, the warring factions have made the proclamation that civility is no longer applicable here, where the persuasion is no longer applicable, force is applicable. In that case, you do what is necessary to end the initiator of the force and keep them from doing that in the future. But I would say that the Constitution is a reflection of reality as well. It's a reflection of the power dynamics that always occur in governments, and it's an intent to limit those power dynamics to maximize the freedom of the individual. It is not a floating abstraction. The Constitution is not a floating abstraction. It is a system of laws and a structure of government that came from long study. The founding fathers studied republics and democracies and types of governments throughout history. And through that inductive process, they were able to come up with a constitution that I think is the best document in the world. Why? Because its principles touch grass, because it's not a floating abstraction. Again, this war is just in the sense that Iran has committed a series of crimes against the United States of America. They have been at war with us since 1979. All the more reason for the president to go before Congress and leave this to a deliberative body and put this in the hands of the people where war belongs. I know the executive is the commander in chief of the armed forces, and there's a certain amount of discretion he has with the armed forces. But ultimately, the power of war, look, in which citizens of the United States are going to die. They are the ones that are going to be on the front line, not the chief executive, and they are the ones whose pockets are going to be picked in order to pay for this war. So they are the ones who feel the ultimate repercussions and should be the ones who decide whether or not they fight. Again, I am going by the principle contrary to my emotional life, Razi, which is I want Iran to be defeated. I want them to be beaten so badly they never embrace Islamicism again. I have been a advocate of Israel for years upon years upon years, even risking my own career to be an advocate for Israel. Because in Hollywood, if you're not an advocate for quote unquote the Palestinian cause, you are persona non grata to folks. I know that's not the narrative that's out there in the real world, but that's the way it works in the real world. So trust me, my sympathies are with the Iranian people. My sympathies are with the Israeli people fighting with Americans. My principles tell me that this has to be gone about in a certain way in order to preserve the liberties of the American people. I don't think I'm wrong.
So, yes, I do know that you are a longtime advocate of Israel, which I appreciate, and you've done that on this channel as well. I obviously still disagree with you on this, and I am going to bring in Eyal Reichel. We are also joined by Daniel, because Eyal does want to debate or not debate,
We're not
not
debating because
debate,
we
discuss the constitutionality of it. Whereas, as I mentioned, for me, It is something that's not unimportant, but not what needs to be done right now. What needs to be done is victory, and we can discuss later if there's a problem with the Constitution.
Would you agree with me? Would you agree with me with this, Razi, that in times of the deepest emotion, the most rational people should be the ones making decisions? I mean, when you feel emotionally about something, you have to appeal to reason in the end, and the Constitution compels us to appeal to reason, right? And compels the war and conflict to be subordinated to a deliberative process, which I agree with. Now, I don't emotionally agree with that. I am a sheepdog at heart. I hate bullies. My instinct is to fight them. My instinct is to fight them, but there are times when I have to reserve that instinct and let my rational mind speak.
I completely agree. We should be rational, not emotional. I think we've been irrational for 47 years, and
Oh,
this is the most rational approach the US has ever had to Iran. But I will let Eyal talk about the Constitution.
Before Yara gets on, I just want to say I'm not going to dispute the fact that we've been irrational for 47 years, because we certainly have. Also, I think you should debate Mike Leibowitz, the vice chair of the American Capitalist Party, on this. Ivar, if you want to debate Michael Leibowitz as well, he's open to debate on this stuff. He's far more knowledgeable, I think, about the constitutional aspects of this than I am. And I'm perfectly willing to defer that to him
Uh,
if there's anything missing in my arguments today.
and okay, yeah, just before I go to you, let me quickly say, because I have been talking about Michael Leibowitz a lot in the past couple of days, and I will not debate him on this, but I do expect James Valiant to do that. I like and respect Michael. He was the first speaker announced for the Irreplaceable Spark Conference, and I certainly hope this isn't going to change that. But I do
He's
not
a good
want.
egg. He's a good egg, and he's all integrity. I love him dearly.
Yeah, and I will. I'm looking forward to his debate with James Valiant on this
Yeah,
if and when it happens.
and look, let's be frank about this before we get into any disputes that we might have. We're all pro values. We all respect the same values. We're very much pro life. We're very much about a reason. And so this comes as a look to me. The best stories in the world are when two parties are ultimately right about something, and they're discussing the details.
Yeah, and by the way,
Oh, by the
the
way,
reason.
Michael says he likes you and he looks forward to speaking.
Awesome. I like him as well. And the reason I have been speaking about him so much over the last couple of days is because I respect him. If he's a random person waving a PLO flag, I'm not gonna, talk about what's wrong with his view. Well, I will, but as a general thing, not individually.
And Michael and I have clashed multiple times over the war in Gaza. As you know, I am a huge supporter of it. I'm a supporter of it more than what's happening now. I mean, I've been unapologetic supporter of complete and total annihilation of Hamas. Anyway, before we get into off a tangent, we should get back onto the track.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I have several points. First of all, I want to say it's great to be able to discuss with you all on that. So, first of all, regarding the Constitution, the authority of the Constitution itself derives from the nature of man. This is a document meant to establish a political system that aligns with the nature of man. So it will allow him to live and be prosperous and to actually survive and have a good life, etc., etc. So, and by the way, just because, and there is a causal link here, since the nature of man does not change, so does the Constitution should be somewhat strict and not changing. It should adhere to the nature of man. Now, the question of the Congress approval for war actually points towards a very critical conceptual and moral problem that Ayn Rand and Leonard Peikoff has related to. And this is the Hegelian look at war ever since the Cold War. So basically, the sheer fact that it was called the Cold War is a contradiction. It's like, yeah, it's a war and it's not a war. We're basically in war, but we don't want the implications of war. We want to have the cake and eat it too. So just like in the Cold War, it should have been treated as a hot war, as a real war, as it was, and whatever means necessary. It's the same deal with Iran since 1979. So in 1979, Iran has explicitly used force against American personnel, American diplomats, and kidnapped 54 Americans. The United States of America should have declared war on Iran, and instead, after a year or two, they went for a deal. Now, this is true that, in fact, war was waged on America, and America essentially surrendered. But the disgraceful act of giving up on itself does not mean the war is over. With all the criticism I have against the American action when war was waged on it, obviously America did not surrender. Another point, and the reason I'm saying it is to say, basically, you don't need an approval of Congress to declare war if war is forced on you. And basically, Iran is forcing war on the United States of America ever since 1979, which is over 16,000 days. Every day is like a declaration of war from Iran ever since. Over 16,000 declarations of war, as I see it. And as Harry Binswanger explains very well, a threat of force should be accounted as a use of force as well. And this is very important. Every time Iran declares it is willing and capable to use force against the United States of America, it is in fact an act of war. It's not a declaration of war, it is an act of war. And as of January 2026, late January, we have official declarations of Iran that like they see American military bases as legitimate military target, and they have intention to attack them. Whether it's an ultimatum or just like a declaration of what they're willing to do is enough to serve as a declaration of war. And according to the Constitution, the president has 90 days to act on its own. So there is something even more fundamental than that. And there is how should I say, a aristocratic debate whether Trump is adhering to the Constitution or not. But there is a political, more essential problem with the Congress regarding the Constitution. Now, this is not a aristocratic thing because it's not a thing the court can settle. It's actually the responsibility of the public, of the American citizen, according to the Constitution. Basically, the judge of the Congress in this case, according to the Constitution, is the American voters. And in a case, basically, this is implied from the Constitution, in a case where a nation imposes a war on the United States, and the Congress fails to adhere to reality and fails to declare war, it is the responsibility of the American citizens to send a signal to Congress like this is wrong, and to support a party that says like we're going to declare war and vote for it. And this is a failure both of the Congress and of the American people since 1979, that basically there is no demand, neither from most of the Congress nor from the American citizens, to call for a declaration of war against Iran, which is obviously necessary since the United States of America are in a war with Iran since 1979. And this is essentially true. So the biggest constitutional failure is a political failure in which the US House is refusing to adhere to reality and declare a war in Iran. And it does create a constitutional problem for the president. It's a technical problem for the president, since there is no approval from the Congress, which is needed from reality. So he cannot legally act in some interpretations of the Constitution. Now, once again, I return to the essential point. A threat of force is a use of force. You cannot deny that. And therefore, basically the 90 days counter for Trump to attack Iran, for me, it resets every day. Every day in which Iran does not withdraw its threats against the United States of America resets the 90 days counter. And one more thing, there has been many cases in the history of the United States of America where attack against American citizens was seen as an act of war. I think there was a case in the late 80s where a club in Europe was attacked by Libyan terrorists, and American citizens were killed, and America basically treated it as an act of war from Libya against America, and therefore attacked Libya as well. I don't know if it was approved by Congress, but that's how the things were. And this is very similar with Iran, especially with the October 7th attack, when American citizens has been murdered and kidnapped by Hamas, which is sponsored by Iran. So this is essentially my case.
Mark, before I let you respond, just quickly, thank you, Mr. Men's Deluxe, for the super chat. Mr. Men's Deluxe says, "Bad guys in Persia suffering in Purim." L'chaim. Absolutely. I'm picked the worst time to get off the Hamantashen, but celebrating it with green tea. Mark.
Yeah, I'm very happy that the bad guys are suffering. Let me just throw that out there. I thought a lot of what you said was irrelevant, I'm sorry to say, to the Constitution. Certainly, the Congress has forfeited its job, its constitutionally mandated job. But the solution to that is to not throw out the Constitution. The solution is to get back to the Constitution, to hold the legislature accountable for its actual job. The solution for President Trump now President Trump doesn't seem to have made a single effort to go to Congress. Now, it's one thing. I don't think the 90 days is actually in the Constitution. You can point it out to me if it is. It's certainly in the War Powers Resolution, but
60.
It's 60. It's 60
under War
days.
Powers.
It's
And
60
also,
in the War Powers Resolution.
technically, Congress was checked with Marco Rubio checked with the Gang of Eight before the
Okay, but
strikes happened.
he did make a case before Congress, and Trump isn't known for considering Congress in anything that he does, which is why there's a rash of executive orders coming out, which could be he's legislating from the executive branch, and he's been testing the powers of the executive periodically throughout his presidency, pushing the boundaries of executive power to the point where they're being tested by the Supreme Court. So this is a man who clearly does not respect the enumerated powers clause of the Constitution of the United States, which strictly delimits the federal government to only those powers which are written in the Constitution. Now, I don't think you throw that. I don't think you get to the Constitution by throwing it out. In the same way that Rand said you don't get rid of racism by practicing it with affirmative action. Certainly, we have political issues, but those political issues need to be resolved. And they get resolved by aligning themselves more with the Constitution, which, remember, is meant to protect the liberties of American citizens. It is a document grounded in historical evidence and a deep understanding for the relationships of power and how to limit that power. Now, no matter how much I agree with Iran getting its ass handed to it, which I think it should, the declaration of war on the part of Iran against the United States is irrelevant. Japan committed an act of war against the United States in 1941 on December 7th, and the president, I think, is one of the historical beginners of a man who disrespected the Constitution. Still went to the Congress and appealed to them and got approval from Congress to declare war against Japan. If, as you say, and I agree with you, all of these egregious crimes are out there in the ether, thousands upon thousands of crimes committed against American people, Israelis, the world population, fatwas issued against authors and carried out, I might add, almost to the death of Salman Rushdie, then the case is there for the president to go before Congress and make a case that is irrefutable. Now, yes, we have a Congress that is now embroiled in a tribal war. They don't care about the constitutions. They themselves want to defeat the president, to get their tribe in power. All of that is also irrelevant because we don't get to the Constitution and to the preservation of American liberties by denying it or throwing it out the window. That is pragmatism, my friends. That's not principle.
Yeah, can I jump in?
Yeah.
Because I think to a large extent, I do agree with Mark. Like, we have to look at what is really this war with Iran, as with many decisions in the last few years. This is an anomaly. What is it? What do you call it? Anomaly?
Anomaly?
Anomaly. Thank you so much. And why? Because take things like the Chevron deference that was overturned by the Supreme Court. Or take things that the state should do, right? The purpose of state is to protect individual rights. The American people don't want the American state to be limited to that. The purpose of state is to defend national interest, meaning like the lives of Americans, meaning to go to war with Iran and take out that threat. The problem is, for the last 50 years, both the American people and the presidents didn't want to do that. The fact that somebody like Trump managed to start something like that, that is something. One, nobody of us expected this 4 days ago, probably, let alone like last year, or let alone in the last few decades. So now we are sort of hit with the idea of, yeah, basically something we really wanted to see is might be unfortunately unpopular, and we are in this reality where something we really want to see, like I would say, something like Chevron deference for people who didn't check it. For the last 40 or 50 years, or how much, the agencies had pretty much full on power of the legislature and the executive and the judicial in the way agencies decided certain like controls over the market, right? And that's something Supreme Court overturned, which I think was great to see, and I think also rarity when it comes to like going back to what the I think both the founding fathers and the Constitution implies. So when we go and then if we go to legality of this specific example, well, Trump under War Powers Act seems to have this ability. Now Congress absolutely shouldn't have ability to pass the war power resolution. I don't think Congress is the one declaring war. You cannot take the power of it and give it to the president. The Constitution doesn't allow for any of that. So again, I think what we are really what we are really seeing right now is the fact that for the last, I mean, since World War II, Congress, it's not only that Congress didn't declare war, Congress doesn't want to declare war. They don't want it on them. They don't want to bother. And we've seen that with the legislature for a long time, where basically they don't really even want to legislate. They are much happier just give broad powers to the president and let him deal with it and let him deal with the consequences rather than them suffering from it. And then if you're a president, like, let's say you have the war powers resolution, I mean, kind of, what are you supposed to do with it? You shouldn't have that power. You can go to Congress and again, what if the Congress says, okay,
Did he freeze for anybody
you can
else?
do with it what you want. And here I'm kind of in a,
Yeah, we
did I
lost you
fall
for a
for a
few
second?
You
seconds. but
froze. You froze for a second.
Yeah, what I was saying that basically, I think Congress is very happy to basically, hey, President, we don't want to declare war, but here is a war powers resolution. You do with it what you want. We won't object because again, the purse of the state is still with the Congress. If Congress doesn't like any war, if Congress doesn't like any action, they can, and James said that, they can like this take away money from certain parts of the military. And so I think there was, and this shouldn't be, like Mark said, it should be very specific.
Cutting out again, Daniel.
Supported almost every war, but explicitly is trying to shy away. Did I follow again?
Yeah, you did. I think I got the gist of it. But Daniel, can I just piggyback off
Sure.
of that? Because you're right, the legislature has been forfeiting its constitutional responsibility for decades now. What has been the result of that? The deep state. The deep state is an executive branch that that has no separation of powers. An executive branch that legislates and enforces its own laws. The legislature has completely divorced itself from that. This is the very thing the American people hired Donald Trump to get rid of. Instead of doing that, he's doing the opposite. And the way you get rid of the deep state is to force the legislature to do its job. That's the way you get rid of it. You get rid of these bureaucrats that at the same time make laws and then enforce the laws, interpret the laws. There is no separation of powers. And so it's no mistake that since the legislature has been forfeiting its constitutionally mandated responsibility, that our liberties have been shrinking like mad. Now, despite the fact that this war feels good to me because I like bad guys getting beaten up, particularly bad guys who have been on the stage bullying the world for fucking 50 years. I like that. I still have to stick to my principle, which ultimately is the liberties of the American people, and the way those liberties are preserved is by a strict maintenance of the division of powers, the separation of powers, and keeping those abiding by a strict enumeration of powers. That is the only way our liberties are maintained. As good as this conflict makes me feel, the other part of me understands that if you want to change the Constitution, there's a process to amend it. And why? Why are these laborious processes in place? To subordinate might to reason. And that is a very high calling. And objectivists should be on that, like white on rice, baby.
Yeah, and one thing I would put in just quickly, somebody says this is a pragmatic arguments against Congress, Daniel. No, it's argument against congressmen who like refuse to actually do.
Yes.
And we've seen that. I think, and this is, I'm not sure if unfortunate like part of the Constitution or of the people, because of how hard it is to amend Constitution. What we've oftentimes seen is either the Supreme Court or Congress or President taking some power and then nobody really doing something about it because it's more convenient than to actually fix and change the Constitution. So a lot of the powers that pretty much all branches now have, they shouldn't have. Now everybody can agree with it, but yeah, it should be in the Constitution. It should be an amendment, because now we are in like and that's what I'm saying. Like, we are in this weird sort of scenario where when it comes to this war, pretty much everything is unconstitutional, and nobody is doing anything about it. Congress doesn't care anything to do something about it. Supreme Court is not doing something about it, and President
Yeah.
is not doing something about it.
The Congress wants Trump to fail big time on this so they can hold this over his head in the next election cycle. They're not thinking about the long term. The president isn't even thinking about the long term. I don't think he's capable of thinking in the long term. He's accidentally on the right side of a conflict, but he was alluding the entire time he was in negotiations with the mullahs. I mean, so clearly, I don't think that was a negotiation tactic, Razi. I think that's just the way he rolls. I think he was perfectly willing to deal with the mullahs if they were going to give him what he wants, and perfectly willing to not unseat them if they were going to give him what he wants. He would have considered that a victory. He's the ultimate. This guy is the package, the ultimate pragmatic package. He is the fruit of 70 years of pragmatism in politics. This is what's happening now with Trump. And you have to subordinate your emotions about this to your rational faculty and understand that as good as this makes you feel presently, it's going to redound badly on the American people at some point down the line. And that doesn't necessarily mean with foreign powers. I don't give a shit about that. I give a shit about the relationship of the American people to the power structures in Washington, D.C. That's what I give a shit about. And those power structures are enormously powerful, far more powerful than they were at the origin of this country, and they should be brought back to the powers that they had at the origins of this country.
So, unlike the constitutionality of it, that is something I want to discuss because unfortunately, I think too much of this and too much of what I've seen from good people opposing this military action really boils down to that. It is Trump, and that is the problem. And viewers of this channel cannot possibly accuse me of being a Trump supporter. I agree. He's terrible. He's terrifying. He's threatening, friendly countries. He's doing things in the US that if I had to make a list of terrible things, from worse to worse than that have been done in my lifetime by presidents, Trump would be filling much of that list, much of the top spots in that list. If I had to make the list of best things presidents have done in my lifetime, Trump has now done the absolute best thing that has been done. So yeah, I despise him. I'm terrified of what his presidency will do during his time and after his time in office. But when something like this happens that is really changing the world for the better, permanently.
Razi, we don't know that. I have to tell you that the enemy of your enemy is not your friend. Trump is not your friend. He's so pragmatic and so divorced from principles. We don't know what his end game is. Okay, we don't know. He could be perfectly willing, as he was with Venezuela, to to come up with some kind of bizarre coalition or form some kind of coalition with religious fanatics over there. He's not immune from that. A
Yeah, that would
capitalist,
still be an improvement, by the way,
a
on the current
capitalist,
situation.
it would not. As the UN isn't an improvement because you cannot mix together a melange of oppositional philosophies and expect you can't expect the good not to compromise to a situation like that.
Okay,
Look,
better.
you
Okay,
would know that
let's talk better.
if a capitalist party were in power right now, the war would be declared and that we would prosecute it until it was completed, and it would be short, fast, brutal, and decisive.
Okay,
And we
let
would
me be
also
clear why it would be better, and I'm not saying it would be good. It would be terrible, but not as terrible as the current situation. In the same sense that, Al Qaeda running Syria right now is better than Assad running Syria. Is Al Qaeda better than Assad morally? They're both despicable. I don't want to do that kind of math or try to figure it out. What's much better in Syria right now is that when Assad fell, Israel completely destroyed any military capabilities of Syria. So, unfortunately, the Syrian people have to suffer under Al Qaeda, but Israel and the West are safer from Syria because of that military action. If Iran, I would love to see, I've already said we've tentatively scheduled the irreplaceable Spark 3 for October 2027 in Tehran. I'd love to see that happen. If it doesn't, if Iran, falls into chaos, falls into some other type of totalitarianism, that'll be sad. But if their threat to the West and their ability to sponsor proxies is over, yeah, in pure terms of how the West should look at Venezuela, the current situation is better than the previous situation. It's not what I'd like to see, and I'm not necessarily saying taking Maduro was right, but yeah, it overall.
this is very pragmatic of you. I don't think replacing Maduro with a communist intelligence operative who was responsible for a lot of the brutality in Venezuela actually sent a good message to the Venezuelan people
I
or
agree.
materially improved them at all. The fact that Trump of the United States is controlling the oil there, big deal. That's not improving anything there. He had the opportunity to install Machado. He had the opportunity to give the Venezuelan people the democracy that many of them were striving for. He did not. So that means to me, this guy is a loose cannon on a field. If you disrespect him domestically for the shit he's doing, if you despise him, he's not the guy to be leading the armed forces or policy in the Middle East, a particularly volatile area. You need a principled and intelligent, and I might add, which Trump is not. You need a principled and intelligent person guiding that war. In which case, it would be fast, it would be decisive, it would be overwhelming, it would be over quickly. Remember, this is the guy who stopped Israel in the 12-day war from completely decimating Iran's capacity to make war. Okay? This is the guy that you are now entrusting with this battle.
I'm not
Don't.
entrusting him.
He's not
He
your
is the
friend.
president, and if you ask me between going to war and not going to war, again, the 12-day war ended terribly, and it's a tragedy
Why?
that
And
Trump
why?
allowed
He made it. He
stepped in to
made it. He
save
didn't
the
just
Iranian
allow it.
regime. It's tragic, but it was better. It was a better approach to Iran than any we had seen previously.
So
It was
I'm
far
not
from
settling
perfect,
for
and it was
slightly
wrong.
less evil. I'm not settling for slightly less evil.
Neither
It's
am
still
I.
evil, but you are. You've just said
No,
you are.
I'm
You
not.
spent the
I'm
last 10
saying
minutes saying you are.
Trump is president, and that is a fact, and there is no changing that. What the question now is
Well, there
specifically
is
on the
changing
military
that. Yes,
action.
there is changing that. The American people can change that too through the legislative power. That's possible. So it's this look, we have an amazing document. Let's stick to it because it is a fantastic document. It has protected our freedoms for about 120 years before we started giving up on it. Let's stick to it. That's the way our freedoms are maintained. And if we do that, then it takes the teeth out of the president of the United States and all the kinds of things that he can do to us domestically. And I understand that the legislature doesn't want to take political responsibility for any of this. Well, we can make them do that. The American people can make them do that. They can hold them accountable. So look, don't throw out the Constitution. Stick to it. That's my point. I rest my case. We can go on and talk about the news or whatever it is you want to talk about because I have a little bit more time to spend with you guys.
Yeah.
Unless you want to make
I'm
other.
gonna let Eyal jump in if he wants to say anything about the Constitution aspect of it, and yeah, then let's go back to the news. And Daniel, if you
Well,
want to jump in afterwards.
I'm just going to repeat one of my essential points. I think it's mostly about addressing the American people and the Congress, urging them to declare war against Iran. The sooner, the better. As long as we don't do that, this is the essential, critical, primary step. As long as we don't do that, we're going to have problems. We're going to be in a dilemma whether to put ourselves in a legal aristocratic problem with the Constitution, or to not act, to defend ourselves against an enemy trying to destroy the United States of America, both explicitly, implicitly, trying to achieve nukes, having a ballistic missile arsenal, already attacked military assets of the United States of America and American citizens, including before this attack. So this is the most urgent thing to do in this context. It is about urging the people and convincing them to tell the Congress, hey, you've got to do this. This is the facts are that Iran is waging war against the United States of America, and it's time to adhere that, to make this official. So the United States of America will have all the tools it needs in order to defend itself.
Good. I'm glad. I feel like we came around. So that was my intention. I think that's very good. And I think objectivists should come around to that, man. I really do. Otherwise, they can't really carry the mantle of objectivists. They can't really carry the mantle of being principled over emotions. They can't do that unless they stick to principles. And look, sticking to principles is tough when there's a lot of pressure to give them up. And right now, there's a lot of pressure to give them up. Right? I get it all the time online, but I'm used to it. I've stuck to my principles always, irrespective of what the pressure is on the outside. And some objectivists and some quote unquote liberty people are attacking me vitriolically now because I'm sticking to my principles again. Well, that's what the American Capitalist Party is about. And I think it should be a refreshing change to people out there that they finally have a party out there that isn't pragmatic, that isn't willing to give up individual rights for some expedient, so something that's politically expedient, but will stick to it irrespective because they know that the preservation of the American people's liberties are in those principles, are embedded in those principles. Well, thanks for giving me the time, guys. I'm glad we are on the same page, philosophically, morally, and that makes an argument like this vital. I think this argument has to be had within the objectivist community. Michael and I are prepared to take that to the objectivist community. I hope other objectivists pick up the mantle and do the same.
Yeah,
Although, wait a
and
minute, I don't think Michael's an objectivist. He's objectivist adjacent, but I will pick it up for objectivists because I think this is an important discussion.
yeah, and I will add people who are attacking Michael personally. Yeah.
Can I just say, stop that, man? What the fuck is wrong with you? Don't attack the man personally. If you think he's wrong, attack him on his ideas, and he will engage you on the level of his ideas. Don't be
Well,
attacking the guy personally. That's just cheap and is cowardly.
Yeah,
Look,
that's the difference between thinking somebody's wrong and feeling that somebody's wrong. And by the way, we all get that. I don't know, Mark, if you saw the reply to your reply to my reply on Instagram by some actual, as far as I can tell, actual Nazi. So yeah,
Yes, look, you don't have the balls to come up to me personally and attack me because I'll slap you in the mouth. You don't have the balls to attack Michael personally. So don't do it online because you're hiding behind a screen. Just engage the ideas, man. And then you may convince somebody of your perspective. I mean, this is all about this is a public forum where we're engaging ideas that need to be engaged. These are very important concepts, and the future of our country and our liberties is hinging on how we answer these questions. So be respectful, man. Don't fuck with us, because Michael and I are both street guys, So it's like, we're not, you wouldn't do it to us in person, so don't do it to us on behind your keyboard.
I agree with the be respectful. I don't agree with the slapping the disrespectful people in the face. We'll agree to
All right, I'm
disagree on
saying
that.
it figuratively. I'm not going to slap anybody unless they try to slap me first. But it's again, here I am going according to my motion, but I would rationally push that impulse down.
Thank you, Amir, for the super chat. Amir says, time for a new biscuit, Chaminai Tashin. Yeah, it doesn't really roll off the tongue, but if you can make it keto, because Yar hasn't celebrated Purim in years, so yeah, let's make that happen. Thank you, Bonnie, for the super chat. Um, Somebody in the chat, where is this? Yeah, one of the newer trolls, but new regular trolls, uh, says Razi is fully into this war. Absolutely, absolutely. I've been waiting for this for a long time, and I hope, and I'm saddened that it took so long because now it'll take longer and more people, unfortunately, on the good side are going to die because we didn't have the balls to do it when we should have way back. Um, okay, maybe I'll quickly address the fact that, there was the troll in the chat who tells us I'm not a troll. I'm not on either side. I'm here to listen to different opinions. Who has been here for our long live streams in the last couple of days. And yesterday, when he was challenged on his views, said, "Oh, well, you want to be in an echo chamber? I'm leaving." When all we were doing were addressing him. He is now full on doing Iranian propaganda in the chat. Look at it if you can. It's fascinating. Actual propaganda of the Iranian regime is what he's doing, and I think stronger than the Iranian regime's propaganda itself. I don't think they're claiming that they're on the verge of victory, but whatever. Thank you, Jonathan, for the super chat. Thank you, Jin Trax, for the super chat. Jin Trax says, "I support you, Mark." I also support you, Mark. I just completely disagree with you on this. And thank you, Alexis. I mean, I support you generally. Alexis, thank you for the super chat. Alexis says it is not impossible to both condemn the complete disregard for the Constitution and rejoice at the fantastic opportunity and the delivery of justice these strikes represent.
Well, yes, it is. Yes, it is. It's possible to do both those things because I want the Iranian regime to be overthrown. It's definitely on my wish list. I just think there's a process to doing it that preserves American liberty, plain and simple.
Also,